Welcome to the Fall to Grace. I'm Cyan.
And I'm Connor. And today we're going to talk about experience. And Cyan, I think you're coming back from a very profound experience that you've just had. So I was hoping you could share a little bit about that with us.
Sure, Connor, of course. Yes, as our dedicated fans may have noticed, we were gone last week. We didn't post.
Shame on us.
I spent the week in Los Angeles with my spiritual community and my teacher, and I had a really profound experience, as I always do when I'm around that group. I feel like since I've gotten back, I'm integrating all this wisdom that I received and all this intense energy. Like I've been walking on sunshine. It was just so amazing, the kind of energy in those rooms, meditating all together and praying all together and, doing all these spiritual things like Homa.
Nothing like a little fire ceremony.
Yeah, a little fire ceremony. And yeah, since then I've been feeling like I've taken some uppers or something. I feel like boing, like just so intense in my body and in my mind, and I have so much to integrate. But it's been really neat. So I'm really grateful to have had that really distilled version of spiritual experience. I think we can find many different versions of this that are maybe not quite so intense, but I really appreciate how intense this one was. I got a lot out of the intensity of it. So
Yeah, wow. I mean, it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. I'm very excited for you. I'm a little bit jealous. But I think it brings up a pretty important point about faith and the kind of fall that we're talking about here. When we are open to these kinds of experiences, like just even that energy pulsing or being open to doing a very intense kind of meditation practice or very intense kind of prayer practice, like these things have very tangible results in us, and we can feel the energy in our lives kind of shift, and we start to change as people. And it's all just one big current that we're kind of riding. But many of us are like really shut off to the belief that these experiences are real or that they exist. And so we kind of like don't do them at all. And we just be like, oh, that's a Christian thing. That's like a weird Hindu thing. We just don't open our minds to the idea that these things could have value. Like, this is not about me getting into heaven. This is about me like being able to walk in my life and feel that energy and feel that kind of insight and clarity, which we get from these practices.
we're creating our own heaven and hell in our day-to-day life with our action. That's kind of part of what karma is. When I'm acting on a certain vibrational plane, I'm creating certain effects, and when I'm acting on a different vibrational plane, I'm creating different effects. I mean, I don't think that's that wacky and woo-woo. I feel like people are like, "Oh, the vibrations," but that's something that we can feel all the time. That's something we talked about in the last episode or the last couple episodes with fear. We can literally feel the difference between acting out of fear, acting like an asshole because we're afraid of something versus alchemizing fear or alchemizing these bad feelings that come up and deciding to act a different way. Those are two different vibrational frequencies that we can literally like see the effects of in our lives. So when we get together in a big group setting or we really dedicate ourselves to a spiritual practice like prayer or meditation, and again, when we intensify it by like kind of putting our heads together as a group, yeah, no doubt. It's palpable the impacts that it has.
Absolutely. I wanted to touch on something you said about how we think this stuff is woo woo. I think that idea stems from like some of the associations that we have with some of the terms, like even vibrational frequencies is pretty inaccessible for somebody who's not part of these communities. Like, you grow into these terms as you start to do spiritual practice, because you start to like realize that it is a vibrational frequency, and that like when people are meditating in a room, it is amplified. Like, the effect of your meditation is amplified, but you don't get to that cause and effect very intuitively. Your feelings are your guides, but to get through them, we need community, and we need like elevated energies to be able to really progress very quickly and to grow very fast. And so, like, this is part of the goal of spiritual practice and some of these things, is to accelerate our growth and like grow towards a healthy kind of existence where we are happy and we are healthy and we do have good relationships and we do help each other out. This is the essence of changing a society, is like, you start to, when you feel better, like, you start to help other people. When we're all feeling terrible, like we all are right now, and we are kind of covered in that fear that we've been talking about, like, we start to impinge on others and it becomes a competition. Like, this is the capitalist, we're all in a competition all the time kind of thing. So when we do this work, we have a monumental effect on those around us too. The other way you can think about this is it's much easier to talk to somebody who's smiling. And when somebody who's smiling really big at you, like makes you smile, like these energies are contagious. And so when we're in a room, that's what we're doing. Is like somebody yawning very spiritually, and it is so contagious around the whole room that everybody has it now.
No doubt. I mean, remember when you were a kid and your dad would get home from work and like be grumbling and like throw his boots on the ground and it would just change the energy of the house, even if you were in like your bedroom? It's palpable. And meditating with really advanced meditators, for example, is such a crazy experience. Meditating with Connor's meditation teacher, you can like feel him across the room when he like locks into meditation. It's insane, actually. It's like a superpower.
Yeah, it's insanely liberating to be in that presence. I mean, I can ride that for like 2 or 3 days meditating with him. Like I feel better and calmer and more open for the next 2 or 3 days. So once you start seeing the benefits of these things, they become contagious. Like prayer and ceremony and all these things are not burdens. These are things that we do very much out of the pureness of our hearts because we start to feel better and we start to see the value of those things. Like when we think about religion kind of from the outside, it feels like a system of obligations and like we're meeting qualifications to qualify for God's approval or something like that. But what you really start to realize is like, no, these are rituals that exist that are kind of just recommended because they're powerful. And that's just kind of a different take on it. You don't have to accept any of these rituals. You don't have to do any of these things in any form of spirituality. You do the ones that really speak to you.
Yeah, even if that's like baking a casserole. Like baking your neighbor a casserole has a vibrational frequency versus egging your neighbor. Like, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So we actually do this all the time. It's kind of like we're practicing magic all the time. We just don't call it that. But we do recognize, even people who aren't woo-woo, recognize intuitively these kinds of vibrational frequencies.
I absolutely think so. We just don't really trust them because we have mixed motivations in our lives. Like we can be in something that we love doing and then we second guess it because it doesn't pay enough. We have this very driven culture in our society. We have a lot of pressure from people around us and our parents and all of these things that kind of tell us that the things that we like may not be worthwhile, right? This is just kind of the idea of the American society. I've been down on American society this week just because it is so built around this. And, you're criticized if you're not shooting for the stars in many ways. And, the Tao or God or the vibe or the universe, spirit, whatever it is, runs on this kind of energy of cohesiveness and harmony. And so we're more seeking that than success. We're seeking fluidity and we're seeking the ability to flow through our lives. And that can be absolutely baking a casserole. That can be in deep prayer. That can be in deep meditation. The Buddhists, the Zen Buddhists especially, push for the chop wood, carry water kind of thing, which is what do you do before enlightenment? So you chop wood and carry water. What do you do after enlightenment? Is you chop wood and carry water. Anything can be sacred. What makes it sacred is how you do it.
Totally, because freedom is something that is accessible to us, even if we're in a prison cell, even if we're chopping wood and carrying water, even if we're doing something we hate or we're at work. Freedom is accessible to us. We just have to practice getting to it, accessing it.
I totally agree. I think we are kind of prisoners of our own experience. And this is one of these mind things, right? It's one of these things that we've talked about in the past couple episodes where we just don't have a lot of control over our thoughts. And a lot of these spiritual practices are oriented on getting a little bit of control. I mean, you really start to enter into a fight with your mind in many ways, but we need help to do that. And so being open to these spiritual practices and like being open to grace.
Yeah, grace. Grace is awesome. In my own experience, comparing like how I felt this time, even this time last year to how I feel now, it's like night and day. I was deeply sad this time last year. I've really grown a lot. And yeah, part of that is kind of the grace of some sort of higher power and being ready for it, kind of being brought to your knees in a way. I went through a really sad experience a year ago, and it was kind of like the beginning of the dissolution of self. I realized that my idealized self, or I should say, an identity that I really related to, was actually false. I guess I could give specifics here. I had a very intense, lovely, beautiful love affair with a man for a few years. It kind of defined like my 20s up to that point, I would say. And my ego really related to something about it. It really was attached to the identity that I had. I guess being his girlfriend or being loved by him. I created a whole storyline about myself and my worth around it, I guess. And when he dumped me, I realized a few things. I realized that I was like a child who had touched the stove and I like yanked my hand back and was like, "Oh my gosh, fire's hot." That was the first time I just really realized fire can burn you. And fire in this instance is like a deep attachment to something. And I realized that that really applies to any kind of attachment you have. Any kind of attachment you have can be instantly ripped away from you without your consent. Luckily for me, that was a pretty easy fall to grace. I think a lot of people, including Connor, have had it a lot harder. I mean, there are other things too, but that was a very big aha moment for me. I was so hurt. It was kind of like a Romeo and Juliet thing, but instead of actually like, hurling myself from a tower, I was like, wait, is that how she killed herself? I can't remember.
She drank the poison. She licked the poison off of the gauntlet.
Okay. Yeah, it was kind of like a Romeo and Juliet thing, except for I didn't actually, you know, end my life. I ended this like kind of conceptualization of myself that I had. It was the beginning of the dissolution of self. And I never want to experience that longing again. That's a vibrational frequency I refuse to go back to. That like deep ache, that deep longing, for something or someone that you can't have who doesn't love you back. We get to choose the vibrations that we operate at. And I won't choose that again.
Beautiful. I think it is beautiful. I mean, it doesn't really matter how you get here, but we all get to low points in life, and some of us get to desperately low points. Many of us, right? We experience tragedy, we have massive breakups, we go through uh really really tragic loss in our lives, and we're brought to very low points, and it seems like almost that and the openness that you need to embark on this journey are intermingled in many senses of it, that like most people do get to God when they are at their weakest, and that's because that's kind of where God gets in through the cracks. God shows up when we need him most in many ways. And if we do earnestly kind of seek, we do find some relief, and we do find that we can grow from these things. One of the biggest essences of what you just said is like, I am now making the most of this. I'm now choosing not to do that again. And so when we have grace in our lives and we commit to building in our lives and we commit to these ideas, like some of these spiritual concepts of like impermanence, right? You talked about how these things can be ripped away from you and attachment's painful. Like the impermanence of things also means that I am not stuck in any mood forever, right? Like I am going through a horrible breakup, but this must pass too. And when you start to understand that, you also begin to be able to use your experience to grow as a person. And you stop saying, poor me, and you start saying, kind of, thank you for the challenge. Like I've grown so much and I've learned so much in this year, right? In these last few years, I've learned so much almost exclusively because the years before that were so painful. And I just the last few years decided to learn my lessons from everything that was happening to me in life. And that's a powerful shift. I mean, I gained some autonomy, I gained some freedom, and I was like on track to finding that authentic self after doing that. But in your journey, Cyan, do you feel as though you're like more engaged in your life at this point?
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel empowered to I hate to harp on the whole like vibrational frequency, but there's so much truth to it. I feel empowered to choose the frequency that I operate at now. And I thought that I was just like a victim of my circumstances in that regard before. Now I realize like it's up to me, And especially being around these teachers, kind of going back to what we were talking about before, like Connor and I have both had so much opportunity over this past year to meet some really amazing spiritual teachers, and being around them, you just realize what is possible. You know what I mean?
And you realize the progress you could make too. Like, I mean, it's a promise at that point. We're searching for some sort of stability and security. And this path has so much stability and security on it that doesn't make sense objectively, right? Like the faith I have grants me more security than the numbers in my bank account, which I never thought was going to be the case.
Yeah, because no matter what happens with the economy, you can be assured that what you put in, you will get out with your spiritual practice. That is a promise. I see it. Now I do quite a bit of sadhana, spiritual practice, and I see the benefits. Literally, I see the benefits day to day. It's so tangible to me.
And it's addictive, right? Your daily life gets easier to live.
Yes, absolutely. And as an addendum to what I was saying a minute ago, it probably sounds really privileged when I'm like, oh, it doesn't matter so much what's happening in the economy when you can kind of lock into your spiritual practice. I get that that sounds privileged, but I will say that this gives you the spaciousness to be a better neighbor and a better community member and all the things that you want to be, and like all the things that are actually really important in this future. I am a better person because of my spiritual practice. That's objectively true. Everyone in my life can attest to that. So I don't think it's actually privileged. I think it's kind of our like duty and responsibility, our civic duty to put this stuff into practice a little bit. Personally, it helps us all be better in so many ways. Like when you have spaciousness, you're not flipping out on people and you're not getting into these silly relationships with people who don't love you and then, spinning out. That's the example I just gave in my own life. And I don't know. I'm a more well-rounded person too. Like the practical benefits are just as clear as like the esoteric kind of benefits. You know what I mean?
I come from a background of like being very politically engaged and very worried about society and very worried about the world. And that kind of stuff like kept me from this and it kept me from God because it was just like, oh, what about this war? What about that war? What about this economy? What about this presidency? Right. And I was blaming my external circumstances. Like what this practice does is like shows me that stuff is happening and I'm a small part of it, but I have no control over any of this. And I mean, we're coming to a collective realization that like none of us can control any of this and that it's all just kind of corporatized and pretty awful in many aspects. I have no idea what's going to happen. And if I can lean more into that unknowing and that like it will be okay, and that if I lean into my path and if I just keep trusting my spiritual practice and things like that, that I will be okay, my present experience is fundamentally shifted and I'm enjoying life quite a bit more. And I'm not just waking up in fear that today's the day that the robot is going to take my job and today's the day the economy is going to collapse. Like those things may happen, but I'll still be me, having my own experience and still have my choices to make. And that's about who I am way deep down. It's not about my job title. It's not about my economic status. It's like who I am. And that's what we're set out to discover.
I think so much of that fear is actually like fear of death too. It's like, well, I could lose my job to a robot and then I could go hungry and then I could die. It's all like connected to death. And through meditation and sadhana, spiritual practice, you start to be less afraid of death. And so then therefore you kind of start to be less afraid of everything, in my experience.
Many of the Buddhists say the more you think about death, the happier you will be. And like to make a point of thinking about death multiple times a day. It's an extremely profound idea because thinking about death really gets you acquainted with the idea of impermanence. So you're less attached to the things in your life. It gets you more in touch with reality, like you're talking about, which is just like, I'm not actually going to die here. Like, I just feel like I'm going to die.
Or I am. And then what?
Yeah, right. But even that one's reconciled. So like this thing about death like is multifaceted and really really cool. But deep down, that's what our bodies are telling us too, right? Neurologically, our amygdala is activated, and we are generating a fight or flight response. Our fear is so nuanced that we don't really realize that it's all still fight or flight. We think it's like depression. And it's like, no, you're fleeing or you're fighting. You're one of those, and it's just turning up as depression. And so, yeah, like coming to some sort of faith really alleviates all of that, and you're less sensitive to those things. When it is all the bad economy, the bad job market, the bad everything's going to be bad forever, ever, ever. Like, why would I ever do anything? And so I can't live in that kind of reality. Like, I have to understand that my reality is actually very different from that. I have tons of choices to get up and get out of bed and go do things. I have tons of things to explore. I have tons of things I could learn. Like when you start to be engaged in your life, the bad things that happen to you are also kind of signs, right? When you're really upset at your job and you're feeling undervalued and all of these things, like that's a sign to move on. And so often we don't take those signs because we don't see them as signs. And so we rarely pivot when we need to, and we only really change when it gets horrible. Nobody wants to change until things get terrible. And so we chase things to the very end that have been God, or the sign has been telling us is horrible for months and months and months. and then it finally comes to a head. And this happens in a lot of long-term relationships where people are just fighting against breaking up, even though there's no love in the relationship. This happens in jobs where you're underpaid, undervalued, and doing something you hate and you're miserable every day. Your feelings become your signs. And in that way, you get to start to tap into like making changes quicker. And when you make changes quicker in your life, you're pivoting back into the flow, right? It's all about walking this tightrope. And when things start to get difficult, it's generally a sign that there needs to be a pivot because this calm, compassionate energy is very clean. It doesn't have a lot of roadblocks in it, and especially unnecessary ones. Sometimes our struggles are also our defining kind of moments, like your breakup and my alcoholism, right? Like that's a defining moment that I had to go through. But many of these things are just problems that we're creating in real time.
Out of fear a lot of times too. Yeah.
Yeah, just fear of loss of being like the partner you've been with for years that has become so much a part of your identity. Even when the love and the spark are long gone and you kind of hate each other. Like people live years and years in that space. I mean, up until like a generation ago, people lived forever in that space, right? Because they just accepted that that's how it was. And so we have to confront some of these ideas because the norms are so strong. And when you start to do that, like your life becomes so much more rich and you're welcoming so much more experience because you're willing to lose things. You're not as afraid of losing everything because you understand that it's all going to work out. That fear tells you that this is forever. It's never going to work out. You're going to be homeless and, sad forever. And we buy that thought. We buy into that all the time. And every single thought comes from that belief system. As if I break up with this person, I'm never going to find anybody again and I'm going to be alone forever. And I'd rather be in this than be alone forever kind of mentality. Like that's the danger of the mind is it keeps us trapped. So doing a spiritual practice is about conquering that aspect of your mind.
Yeah. And sometimes you kind of have to do something outrageous in order to conquer your fear in your daily life. This is a great example, but over the weekend, me meditating in graveyards in the middle of the night, it helps me to conquer my fear in my daily life. You know what I mean? Like some of this stuff does genuinely seem outrageous, and yet it's so helpful. And okay, you don't have to like meditate in graveyards. That's kind of my preferred flavor, but you can do anything. Just start practicing, you know?
It's very different than my flavor. So I like it.
Connor and I have very different flavors. That's why we make good podcast hosts.
I got a fun loving God.
My God is scary.
No, yeah. No, it's beautiful. And there's so many different ways to get there. Just being open to the scientific experiment of this whole thing. Many of these spiritualities, I think, are methodologically like they follow the scientific method. They say if you do these things, you will achieve these results. And thousands of people have gone through these processes and changed fundamentally. And we still don't believe it because we have like this repugnance to it because it defies some of our kind of logic systems.
Our culture's logic system, our current culture.
Yeah. And so, like, the more we're just open to this stuff, the more weird it gets. And it gets pretty weird. I mean, we're getting very weird in our joy here, right? We have found a lot of weird stuff. And it's incredible. And it keeps building and building and building. And the things that are for me keep finding me. And the things that aren't also keep moving away from me more and more.
Who's to say this? Who's to say meditating in a graveyard is really weird? I think our culture is really weird. It's almost like some of this stuff is just weird because we have these goggles on that have been put on us by American society. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, we'd have to really debate the meditating in a graveyard one. But I agree with you. I really do. It's just a reach for some of us where we currently are on the path. But at the same time, like, yeah, being in a VR kind of headset, just like hanging out in the metaverse is also extremely strange. And so we do strange stuff, but some of them are more socially acceptable than others.
I think Cyan halls and big McMansions are very weird. I think that's a lot weirder than death meditation.
I mean, we do tons of crazy things in our life, and some of them are exceptional and some of them are very mundane, but we do them because societally that's what we're kind of taught to do, and we're trained to be certain professionals and we're trained to be certain people, and that doesn't necessarily fit for every single person, and it doesn't fit for most of us, right? So much of what we do is like, oh, no, I make good money. I make a decent paycheck. I go to Cabo once a year. It's great. Kids love it. Kind of thing, right? Like we are just constantly suppressing these things with vacations and with just little band-aids. And then ultimately it boils up. And that's grace right there, is that when that boils up and you really do have to confront these things, I mean, there's so much grace in that. Yeah. I'm talking to anybody who just feels awful right now. Like there's, and it resonates with anything in this. Like there's so much grace where you are right now. And that's the fall to grace. I mean, if this is the essence of the title of this podcast, it's like taking this leap, being open to these kinds of things more and more, because your heart's more broken and more broken and more broken. And so you have to turn to something that is lasting.
Yeah, if the McMansion isn't doing it for you, then thanks for listening, because maybe we can help guide you.
Yeah. As a reminder, guys, we do want to take any questions, any comments that you guys have about this podcast. We love ratings. We love subscriptions. If you guys can all do us a favor by making sure you're hitting those buttons for us, we would really appreciate that.
Yes, you can find our Instagram at The Fall to Grace, and we'll see you next Monday.
Love you guys. Hey, guys. Connor here. In the spirit of taking these questions, we did have a question come in from one of our listeners that we thought was really good and wanted to address for you guys. Just kind of benefit both her and all of the community. I think these questions are really important as we move down these paths. So much of what you read and so much of what is talked about, and even so much of what we talk about, is really this idealized version of how you should be. Like when you are totally through with this path, you will have a totally open heart and an open mind, and you will feel great all the time, and you'll have access to all these wonderful things. And it really discounts the idea that much of this is just a process. And many of us are moving towards that. And there are all sorts of kind of way stations along the way that we have to move through. So this question really gets at the heart of that. And I love it for it. Our listener was asking about, being in a new stage of life. And she felt as though she was grappling with some new ideas that she was having about really branching out and getting into new communities, and feeling very awkward in those spaces, not feeling like she had a ton to share when she was in those spaces. And she said this kind of had reflected in a couple aspects of her life, including a new relationship in which she was struggling with authenticity and felt that the relationship itself is extremely powerful. But at this point, she's having a hard time showing up authentically and feeling like her partner may be doing more of that in the relationship than she is capable of at the moment. So I just wanted to take those questions kind of head on, and I want to take them sort of one by one. So the first question was around that getting in new spaces and getting in new community and trying to integrate yourself in those communities, and struggling with kind of the self-esteem that comes from putting yourself out there, as well as just not feeling as though you're part of necessarily. So to that question, what I would say to our listener here is that it is that so often in this path, we are extremely goal oriented, and we want to walk in and we want to feel accepted and we want to excel immediately upon our arrival. But that's just not the way things are in life. I mean, most of the things in our life are extremely awkward, especially at the beginnings. New friendships are extremely awkward. New communities are going to be extremely awkward. New relationships are extremely awkward. And so we need to kind of hold space for that to also be true. That while we are working down this path towards freedom from fear and freedom from expectation and those things, we are still extremely plagued by the expectations and by the fears that we have. And those are going to show up in those communities. So it's important to recognize that it's a huge step to even branch out and move into these community spaces, to even show up in these community spaces and say absolutely nothing the first time that you're there requires a tremendous amount of courage and faith. And so we move much more incrementally down the line. And we need to come to terms with that. Our progress will be quick at times and it will be slow at other times, but we always just stay oriented in the right direction. I always like to think about this as just having my feet pointed in the right direction. I don't have to take the biggest steps every single day. I can walk a centimeter down the path in a day. But as long as my feet are in the right direction, I am still moving down that path. Despite, we're always going to have awkward days and we're always going to have bad days. But we only let those things be minor setbacks and we keep going forward despite those things. And the rest will just come. these early kind of spaces are also, these early emotional kind of reactions are also important parts of our journey because they show us what's good for us and what isn't. Not every single spiritual community that you join is going to necessarily be what you need, especially as you're first starting to branch out. Some of these may feel a little foreign and a little awkward and a little not for you. So it's important that you be able to trust that gut and pull back from any of those communities and lean more into the ones that do call you in more and more. Ease is kind of the sign of grace. So try to follow the easiest path. Try to follow the places where it is easier for you to express yourself and where you could see yourself expressing yourself a little bit more in the future. And all of that is just coming. There's not a lot that we have to do. She had spoken about some of the shame spirals that we kind of fall into when we maybe come home from one of those events and feel like we didn't contribute as much as we could have. In cases like that, like we just recognize that those are very minor, that they don't have any significance, and that we took a large step forward by just being there today. So it's important that we channel our gratitude, and it's important that we recognize that we're not always going to see spiritual progress. Spiritual progress is intangible in many ways, which is why it's just important that we're pointing our feet in the right direction. So this kind of leads into the second part of this question, which was about this new relationship and finding authenticity in that new relationship. That's also very much a similar answer, right? That relationships, no matter what kind of relationship it is, even if it's the perfect relationship or something that's totally not for you, they're very awkward at the beginning, and we are just getting to know each other in many cases. Even after months, we don't fully know some people, especially our partners who we are trying to get to know intimately. So when we're in relationships and we're kind of embarking on that relationship journey, it's important that we just recognize that this is always going to be part of it. We will continue to deepen and grow in our relationships with each passing day if it is the right thing for us. And if it does continue to deepen and grow, then there's nowhere you need to get to. It will continue to deepen and grow until the day you die, if that is the right relationship for you. It's also an important space for us to figure out if those relationships are the right ones for us. So many of us are very concerned about being in the relationship and finding like eternal partnership and eternal happiness that's kind of promised by that societal dynamic, that we are really blind when we go into those. And so it's important that we're paying attention in those awkward moments to what is kind of the issue. Is it me? Is it them? Is it something in our relationship? And just trying to create as much clarity and kind of security in our relationships as we possibly can. We also have to have room for the relationships to not be the right thing for us. This is super important if you want to be free in this life. So having these spaces and having these early conversations really gives us an early window into how things are going to be. And if this thing is right for me, this is all about just being engaged in the process and just staying engaged and having your feet pointed in the right direction. From what I heard from this call, our listener is doing amazing. I mean, taking new steps in relationships and taking new steps in community is huge. The rest follows. It's just so important that we take those first steps. And if we can take that first step, a lot of it becomes easier and easier and easier and easier. So I super appreciate the question. Thank you so much for putting it to us. Love you guys so much. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll be in touch soon.